Hello and welcome, one and all. My name is Brandon Martin. I am the primary curator of the S.E.E.D for Growth Conference. Well, actually, I'm the primary curator of the S.E.E.D conference itself. I'm also the primary host of this conference. So I would like to give my personal appreciation to all the guests and attendees for taking time out of their daily lives to watch these presentations that these amazing light workers have brought together to help humanity spread freedom and knowledge as far and as wide as possible. I'd also like to thank the presenters themselves for putting in all the hard work because it's not easy to get things like this going. I'd also like to give my personal appreciation and thank you to the tech team, the people who are behind the scenes helping out with this presentation and with this whole entire conference. Without them, this would not be going on. So without further ado, let's get right into my presentation. My presentation is called Sight Beyond Illusions, Building on Firm Foundations. Now, this is going to be a rudimentary presentation. I kind of sped through this one to try to get it together. It was kind of a rush job for me. Usually I put in a lot more time, but considering of all the things that was going on, I just didn't have as much time to put into this presentation. But I made it pretty basic for individuals who are just coming online. So this presentation is about understanding the firm principles and the foundational ideologies that we need to be building off of in order to create a better world by creating a better self, by enhancing our own consciousness to create better behaviors in our world. So the topics we will be talking about is teachability, epistemology, the occult, gnosis, presuppositional worldviews, cognitive dissonance, critical thinking, problem solving, controlled opposition, truth versus falsehood, and morality and freedom. There also will be many, many other topics within this presentation. So let's get right into it. First, I'd like to give a warning and a disclaimer to all those who are new to my work and to those who are new to the S.E.E.D conference. Now, the first thing I'd like to say is that this is not all my work. It is an aggregated synthesis of occult knowledge, or knowledge in general, put forward by a vast amount of researchers from a variety of different schools of study. If I happen to have seen further than others, it is only because I have stood upon the shoulders of giants and looked to shoulder others. So I look to be that support pillar for those who are trying to see further. The information contained within this presentation could not possibly accomplish covering all aspects of the topics that I have chosen, nor am I claiming that I have the totality of that knowledge. I am only here to share what I have come to learn and understand as some of the most important hidden knowledge out there. I am not attempting to convince anyone to believe anything that I say or anything contained in this presentation. I only ask you to keep an open mind and seriously consider this information that is being provided. I'm only looking to influence you into doing your due diligence into researching these topics for yourself. The worst thing that you could do is blindly believe what I say and take it without doing your due diligence and doing your own homework. So mainly these three caveats are, hey, this is not all my knowledge. I can't cover all the aspects of all these topics and give you all the answers, and nor do I have all those answers. I am still a student as well. And, just don't believe me. Like, look into this information for yourself and decide for yourself. I'm not trying to convince you of this information. You need to do that work for yourself and come to the correct understanding of these topics. Another thing I like to point out is that we find a lot of time that people will attack the messenger. So I made this slide called Killing the Messenger. Some people may take offense to some of the information contained within my presentation here today. And if that is the case, so be it. Get as offended as you like. One of the most fallacious things I see happening is people attacking the messenger. So this is the slide called Killing the Messenger. And the truth of the matter is that when you first come online, when you first come in contact with the truth, you probably will be uncomfortable because you are awakening to the truth of the current issues that are plaguing your own mind, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and that which is plaguing the entire world. So it is uncomfortable. And depending on how awake you truly are and how balanced your mind is, will determine how far your offense may go when it comes to that. So the truth is belligerent in times of mass deceit. That's just that. It's just belligerent. Thus, it is likely that you could be triggered here today because of the vast amount of lies that you could falsely believe in. When it comes to raising our consciousness, it is of the utmost importance to never crucify the messenger in favor of your own bias. The message is of the most value, not the messenger. When it comes to a message of truth, it has nothing to do with who said it or how it was spoken to you. All that truly is relevant is whether you recognize it as truth or not. It is your responsibility for what you do with the information provided and what you know to be true. There are those who would violently accost the messenger because they find it contradicts their formally held belief systems and even seek vengeance against those who try to help them with their own incorrect ideas. This is because of their own ego attachment and their fallacious, erroneous, axiomatic belief systems. Thus, they would do anything, no matter how absurd, to defend their falsely held position, to take full value from this message. Lose the ego mindset and you will gain much. I apologize for the typo in that slide. I will have that corrected when I go to upload this. The truth will forever and always remain the truth, no matter how many people don't believe in it. It doesn't matter if you are the only person that knows the truth in the world and the whole world stands against you, it is still the truth, as long as you have correctly discerned it to be the truth. Not because of you, but because it is the truth. And we're going to get into what is truth. So keep calm and don't shoot the messenger. Don't attack the messenger. This is one of the most horrible things that an individual can do when there's someone trying to send you a message. These are just words. You don't need to attack anybody who is just speaking words to you. So discern for yourself, find out whether it's true or not, and then utilize what is true and get rid of what is not. This in no way is a camping zone. So even though this is for the initiates and the layman's, do not pitch your tent here. No camping at this level. Actually, there's no camping when it comes to the truth. You have to go all the way, and that's it. You just have to go all the way. The two biggest mistakes for people is not starting and not going all the way. They end up pitching their tents somewhere where they feel comfortable. This is not a place for you to get comfortable and set up your campfire and sing some songs. This is a place that you need to continue to build off of as a stepping stone to move forward across that river. And it's like trying to pitch a tent right in the middle of the White Rapids or something. You don't want to do that. Absolutely not. Also, this presentation is not for likes. I don't really care who likes me. I don't care if you like the work I've put together. I don't care what you think about me. I'm not doing this to get likes from people. If you like that, that's great. I'm very happy and I'm very appreciative of that. But that is not my primary intention. My primary intention is to make sure to share this information because it is my moral obligation to do so. So we are all going to be initiated now, especially those who have not been initiated. So the initiation process has begun. In the ancient mystery schools, the initiation process was held as one of the most sacred acts. The truth seeker must pass through a second birth, so to say, and those who have attained completion in this exalted state were known as the twice born. Only those who have ascended through the process and have reached the second awakening can start to truly comprehend the mysteries of the self, and that's the capital S self, the higher case self, the higher self, and the realm in which the self operates in. The second birth cannot be attained by joining any sect, lodge, or secret order. It must be personally earned through a rigorous and arduous task of regeneration of character and conduct. One cannot hope to see this change without the correct understanding of morality and natural law. This is nothing new. This truth has always been with us and will always remain with us. It is a universal requirement for consciousness to expand to new horizons and to experience the depths of the mysteries themselves. There is nothing new here, so there's nothing going to be, profoundly new in this presentation that you probably have never heard before. Actually, a lot of this stuff you've probably heard before, especially if you are familiar with my work or other presenters' works, such as Mark Passio's work, because I was directly influenced by his work. And some people may take, they may have issues that they see that, oh, some of this work looks just like Mark's work. Well, I was a student of Mark. So, of course, I would take that which I learned and utilize it. When somebody says 2 plus 2 equals 4, and then you learn that from a teacher, and then you go out and say 2 plus 2 equals 4, well, it doesn't matter if you learned it from the teacher. What matters is that it's true. Okay? It doesn't matter. There's nothing new here. That's not what we're trying to do. And I mean, it's good to bring in new knowledge, obviously, and new discoveries. I'm not saying that there won't be new discoveries ever, but this is a foundational presentation, meaning you're going to find that it's just the basics of this information. So you've probably heard it over and over and over, but for the initiates, maybe they have not heard it, and maybe their taste is not as suited for somebody like Mark Passio's work. So that's why it's important to have a variety of individuals who can really give their own flavor to the work and give their own style to the work, so that we can really reach other people who do not prefer to listen to certain types of speakers. That's one of the greatest things about having many people coming together. Many hands make light work. And we all add our own personal, consciousness to it, our own style, our own aesthetic styles, and our own personal creativity, our choices and our creative applications. So it's very important. So I chose the tarot card of the Fool, the Fool, because this is the initiation. This is where we all begin. The beginning of the journey starts here. This is a very well-known and renowned researcher, esoteric researcher, and scholar. In the mystery dramas, the central character was ever the sun god, the role being enacted by the candidate for initiation in person. He went through several initiations as himself the type and representative of the solar divinity in the field of human experience, Alvin Boyd Kuhn. So that's what this is about. We are all archetypally looked at as sons of the divinity, sons of God, sons of creation. We are the light that must shine bright in our world. And this is why in the mystery schools, each individual would be looked at and appointed an archetypal position as a son. And, this is about rising out of the depths of darkness into light, and we're going to see that. And here's another amazing excerpt from The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall, who is probably one of the most amazing and well-researched esotericists and light occultists that has ever existed. The criers of the mysteries speak again, bidding all men welcome to the house of light. The great institution of materiality has failed. The false civilization built by man has turned, and like the monster of Frankenstein, is destroying its creator. Religion wanders aimlessly in the maze of theological speculation. Science batters itself impotently against the barriers of the unknown. Only transcendental philosophy knows the path. Only the illumined reason can carry the understanding part of man upward to the light. Only philosophy can teach man to be born well, to live well, to die well, and in perfect measure be born again into this band of the elect, those who have chosen the life of knowledge, of virtue, and of unity. The philosophers of the age invite you. So this is about an invitation to you to become initiated, to turn yourself online, to do your due diligence and ascend up Jacob's ladder, up the stairway of heaven, metaphorically. One of the major problems in our world today is that of censorship. And I mean, this is so heavily, blatantly, and brazenly destroying our liberties left and right. Censorship by the mass corporations, by the mass tech industry, and by government specifically, by these military operations within government itself to make sure that people do not have this information. It is the most devastating thing that we are seeing happen. Well, one of the most devastating things. There are quite a few devastating things obviously happening. But I look at it as a return to the Dark Ages, or a place of anti-intelligence, not just anti-intellectualism, but anti-intelligenceism, if that's even a word, but anti-intelligence. We are currently in the age of anti-intelligence by way of blatant ignorance and emotional mind control. People have been programmed to be oversensitized to the wrong things and desensitized to the important things. This state of collective neurosis is degrading every aspect of our everyday life. This is the dark age of the dogmatic fervor that can only lead us in one direction, which is the destruction of all that which is sacred, freedom, and life. When speech is limited by the collective or the few, it is an act of sheer tyranny. We cannot engage in civil discourse anymore due to this overwhelming cult mindset. And what I mean by cult is a grouping or cabal of individuals that espouse a belief system that is a danger to the rights and liberties of other people. It is completely based in fear and will only lead us into a world filled with passivity, anxiety, conformity, mundanity, and will result in unnecessary chaos and is an act against the betterment of humanity. So, as we see in this picture, we have dogmas, protocols, authority, doctrines, orders, code of conduct, norm, establishment. Everything here is, false principles. Everything here is, looking to censor each and every person through political correctness, through burning out all that information that does not conform with the default standard of the authoritarian ideologies. So anything that does not go with the overall agenda of this new dark world order will be burned out, is how they're doing this. So censorship is the pathway to death. So if we look in history, if we look at our history, we can see that anytime censorship has come about, there has been blood shed afterwards. So we need to be very careful, because as censorship starts to restrain our ability to express ideologies more and more, I guarantee there will be blood shed because of that. Guaranteed, that's going to be the result of that. And I don't want that. I'm not saying I want that, and I'm not advocating for that. But that is what happens when you restrain people's ability to have civil discourse about ideas. So we need to be very, very careful when it comes to this. And that's what the S.E.E.D conference is about. It's about being egalitarian with this information, because for far too long has there been a power differential between those who hold the information and those who do not. So whether that's from religious organizations or cults or, secret societies or anything like that, from governments, from intelligence agencies, we need to get this information out far and wide and get it to the people so that they can make their own decisions because they are wise at some level and they are capable of discerning for themselves. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. And one of my favorite founding fathers, Thomas Paine, he who dares not to offend cannot be honest. So, we're in this world where everybody wants to sugarcoat and euphemize everything. They want to not offend you. They're scared to speak certain words. They're scared to look a certain way. They're scared to dress a certain way, to walk a certain way, to move a certain way, to go to a certain place because they might offend somebody. Well, he who dares not to offend cannot be honest. You cannot be speaking the truth because guess what? The truth is going to offend you. Especially people who are living in a bias or living through cognitive dissonance. That's just the truth of the matter. You can't escape that. People are going to get offended. And just because people get offended does not mean that you should not speak your mind about certain topics. We have to speak up more. Moving right along into some of the main topics. So, one of the biggest things here is that we have to understand what it truly means to be teachable. And I have a very simple diagram on the screen here, moving from one extreme to the other. We have on the far left, which would be absolute closed-mindedness, a left brain imbalance, which would be arrogant. And then as we move to the right, we have cynical, skeptical, teacher more so in the middle of the bell curve, and then student on the other side of that middle point, trusting, gullible, and naivete. And that's moving all the way into the right brain imbalance, which would be too open-minded. So what we need to do here is to strike a balance between being a teacher and a student. I am a teacher and a student. I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly teaching. That's how we do this. That's what we need to do, is be in the middle of this bell curve, because this is where you're going to get the most learning from. How much do you learn? This is one of the biggest issues I find with people. Most people are rigidly skeptical or arrogant and cynical, and they just do not have an open mind at all. And this is especially true with left brain eggheads. And then a lot of the New Age community is completely so open-minded that they'll believe anything. They'll take anything into their mind and not filter it. And they tend to be very emotionally mind-controlled because of this. They tend to be, very, very at risk for dark manipulation. And they just don't see this. They just don't care at a certain level, it seems like. So to truly be teachable is to be in the middle of this bell curve. And the way that we do that is by balancing the left and right hemispheres of our neocortex and of our polarities in consciousness. This is an amazing quote by Albert Churchward. Only one has to think and understand that the pursuit and acquisition of truth is of infinite concernment to mankind in the study of the evolution of the human race, and the origin and beliefs and meaning of all the doctrines found throughout the world. By the cultivation of our reason, we are better enabled to distinguish good from evil, as well as truth from falsehood. Both these are matters of the highest importance, whether we regard this life or the life to come. Okay, so this is all about being in that, teachability position. Are you the most teachable? Are you the individual that will learn the most? Because that's going to play out in how you apply that information. Is your discernment. Are you going to discern what is true and what is not? And the way that you have accurate discernment is by cultivating your reason, by exercising your reason, your reasoning skills. Reason is a valuable asset. And I look at reason is the middle point between the two hemispheres. It's not solely a left brain imbalance. So just to give a little bit here. I think that for those who are not familiar with the left and right hemisphere dynamic and the triune aspect of the brain, you can find that information all over the place. I recommend going to the Cubbyhole, www.cubbyhole.com. That's CUBBYWHOLE.com. We go over the triune aspect of the brain very thoroughly. And that's also a great place for the initiate. So, some of this is pertaining to more of someone who has already been initiated and is still looking for more answers. So this presentation is not solely pointed at those who have not been initiated. And I should have clarified that at the beginning. But to move right along, I think this is a great little excerpt from one of his books. I can't remember which book it came out of, but it is saying that truth is of the most important, and we have to cultivate our reasoning so that we can discern truth from falsehood, so that we can discern good from evil, morality from immorality, an action based as a right, an action based as a right, or an action based as a wrong. So what is the occult? What is occult knowledge? Most people, when they hear this word, and I still get it to this day, I ask people constantly, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word occult? And immediately people say evil. They say Satanism. They say, people sitting out in the woods doing rituals, when it has nothing to do with things like this. I mean, it can have some to do with some of that, but that's not what the word actually means. The word occult is derived from the Latin adjective occultus, which means hidden from sight, which comes from the Latin verb occultare, to hide, to conceal, to keep secret. Both are in turn derived from the Latin noun oculus, which means eye. So this is hidden from the eye, hidden from sight. And it could be looked at as the third eye as well, the spiritual knowledge that is hidden from us. So the whole truth is often hidden out of plain sight. And just like this iceberg, most of it is underneath that level point of the water. Just a little bit is peeking out above the water, but the majority of the mass of the iceberg is underneath. And that's how occult knowledge is. That is the occult knowledge, that which is hidden underneath that, that threshold of water. C.W. Leadbeater says, how shall we define occultism? The word is derived from the Latin oculus, hidden, so that it is the study of the hidden laws of nature. Since all the great laws of nature are in fact working in the invisible world far more than the visible, occultism involves the acceptance of a much wider view of nature than that which is ordinarily taken. The occultist, then, is a man who studies all the laws of nature that he can reach or of which he can hear, and as a result of his study identifies himself with these laws and devotes his life to the service of evolution. Very profound quote. So here is a working definition for the word occult. Occult knowledge constitutes both the knowledge of the workings of the human psyche, consciousness, and the knowledge of natural law, both the seen physical laws and the unseen spiritual or metaphysical laws. Occult knowledge is a tool. The level of consciousness of its wielder determines whether or not the result is good or evil. So just like in this image here, you can have a positive result with occult knowledge, where you're like cutting these vegetables and you have hidden information about the secret technique of cutting, for example. That can be a form of occult knowledge. Or a negative result, such as violating somebody by assaulting them with a knife and like murdering them. Taking that which does not belong to you, taking their life, taking their right to physical safety. So it all depends upon the level of consciousness that is wielding that knowledge and how they choose to wield that knowledge. So what is the difference between dark occultism and light occultism? Well, dark occultism is an inductive model intended to hide and conceal mostly the invisible spiritual, but also the visible physical sciences and laws, which are not widely known to the general population, in order for them to create and maintain a power differential between those who have this knowledge and those who do not have such knowledge. This is used to ensure humanity's enslavement and to ensure that the dark occultists remain in power for all time and humanity remains enslaved for all time. So a dark occultist and a dark occult group seeks to create this power differential by concealing this knowledge so that they can keep it compartmentalized and away from those who might challenge their false authority and challenge their immoral behaviors. The dark occultists of our time are not, people out in the woods practicing, witchcraft or something like that. They are people in a multitude of institutions, from government to science to the medical industry to the big tech industries, to the media. Oh God, media is a big one. There are top level dark occultists that are working through all of these interconnected networks of global institutionalized systems that ensure that we remain at this low level of consciousness. And trust me, they are utilizing all the tools they have to make sure that we are suppressed and to make sure that we remain mentally enslaved, emotionally enslaved, and physically enslaved so that they can continue to grow their benefits and grow their little bits of freedom at the expense of other people. It's absolute Darwinism taken to the extreme. It's the idea of the survival of the most ruthless, or really the survival of the people who know the most, really. That's what this comes down to. So it's also religious institutions. You're going to find that religion has some of the darkest dark occultists in existence. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people here are pretty familiar with how dark our world is and how dark these individuals are and how immoral they are for what they are doing. I just want to make it clear, this is not something to be romanticized or sugarcoated. These people are evil. They are the evil incarnate. They are absolute evil incarnate. And they are doing the most horrific deeds onto our planet and onto the people of this planet, onto the animals of this planet. And we need to put an end to that. And this is what this is about, is by leveling the playing field, by getting this information out to the people. This is what they do not want. They do not want people to be well educated when it comes to the sciences, especially the sciences of natural law. So vice versa, what is light occultism? Light occultism is an educative model intended to preserve and protect the invisible spiritual and visible physical sciences, which are not widely known to the general population, in order for them to be utilized and applied when the initiate is ready for the ascension and evolution of their consciousness. It is important to know that they are not withholding the knowledge to create a power differential. They understand that the knowledge comes with a heavy load of responsibility and needs to be treated as sacred, otherwise it will be lost. And that's one of the things that the dark occultists want to do. They want to make sure that this knowledge is either assimilated into their own perverted and sick and twisted ideologies so that they can use it, or they want it gone, because anything that threatens their control and their power, they don't want out there. So they'll do whatever it takes, they'll burn it out of existence and it will be gone. So a light occultist will seek to protect that information by whatever means necessary. And this is done by a state of unity. This is done collectively with the people who are light occultists. And we're going to talk about that at the end of this presentation a little bit more. So the true light occultist is really a de-occultist in the modern era. They are those who are trying to level the playing field by spreading the information as wide and as far as possible. The de-occultist is an individual motivated by an intense, intuitive drive and care about discovering the hidden knowledge of the self and the realm in which the self exists and operates in. Observing the world around them and within them, they gain critical and valuable hidden information, then process that information to come to the correct understanding of the truth, and then act upon that understanding to manifest true wisdom. With their great and fine-tuned ability to discern quickly and efficiently reality from illusion, they work courageously and vigorously to advise, assist, and support those who are in need of such aid and knowledge. Through their excellent deductive and contemplation skills, they seek to shine light upon the deceit, corruption, and lies of the world in order to serve truth and a higher cause than themselves. They leave no stone unturned in their arduous task for truth. They are always seeking to apply solutions within their capability for real and positive change. They are in complete service to truth, love, and freedom, and will always act as the defenders of them. The light work is the right work. So as de-occultists and as initiates, we must understand what the truth actually is, which leads me to my next slide. Truth versus perception. What is truth? We need to have a firm foundation and a simplistic, grounded epistemological basis for the definition of truth. So here's a working definition for truth. Truth is that which absolutely is. It is objective, meaning it is not based upon the perceptions of any sentient beings, which are capable of wavering dramatically away from that which is truth. The truth is unwavering. It is immutable. It is that which has occurred in the past and that which is currently occurring in the present. The truth is singular, meaning that there is only one way things have actually happened. That which is truth will forever and always remain the truth. And a lot of people have issues with this definition. Get over it. That's what it is. It is simply that which is, or that which absolutely is. And I picked this image of Ma'at, the judge of morality in the Egyptian tradition. She's an Egyptian goddess, and you weigh the heart against a feather on the scales of justice, and if your heart is as light as a feather and comes out balanced on the scales, then it means you have been a moral being. And I highly recommend that people check out my first presentation, an occult synthesis, or a synthesis of occult knowledge, part 1, an introduction to natural law, to understand more about Ma'at, where I define her much deeper. Truth versus perception. What is perception? Etymologically, the word perceive is derived from the Latin verb percipere, which is in turn derived from the Latin prefix per, which means through, and the Latin verb sapere or capere, take in, to seize, to understand. So a working definition for perception is to become aware or conscious of that which is, to discover, recognize, discern, and or understand with clarity, direct or indirect intuitive cognition and awareness of elements of the environment through physical and spiritual sensation interpreted in the light of experience. So, if we take this picture, this is a illusion of perception. Is that person actually as tall as that church? Is that person actually grabbing the peak of that church? No, absolutely not. It's an illusion of perception, meaning that it is not true. It is an illusion. And this is how illusions work. From a certain point of view, they look real. But once you broaden your point of view and you change your perspective, then you understand that that is actually not the truth. So perception is a tool, like a lens. Our work is to focus our perception to see reality with clarity, to see clearly. So perception is like a lens. So to see more clearly, sometimes we put on glasses to see words and shapes and forms more clearly. Perception is our glasses for consciousness. And depending on how well your prescription of glasses are, will determine how well you can see with clarity. So let's look at this graph here. Let's take this straight line, this dark blue straight line, as the plane of truth, and these wave lines, these sine wave lines, as our frequency of perception and consciousness. A higher frequency, meaning a more clear perception, means a more frequent interaction with that flat line. A lower frequency means less interaction with that flat line. So let's just say that top light blue frequency is a frequency of love, and that bottom red frequency is a frequency of fear, which is the case. Fear tends to be a low, elongated frequency, meaning you're interacting with that which is less frequently. So what we want to do is raise our consciousness to a higher frequency so that we can align ourselves with the truth. If we raise the frequency to such a degree, it would be indistinguishable from that line of truth. So a higher frequency of alignment with that which is reality and truth, or more frequent interaction, contact with reality, truth, and natural law. So this is how perception works. We have a choice to enhance our frequency, to amplify it, and it is our responsibility to do so. As George Orwell said, the further a society drifts from truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. So this really goes with what I was talking about earlier, with those who are harassed and ridiculed for speaking the truth, those who are censored. Everybody hates people who are speaking the truth. It's because they don't understand the importance and the power of the truth. They don't really understand what truth actually is, and they are in a subjective point of view where they want to play God over what truth actually is. People want to claim that they're God over truth, that they get to deem what is true and what is not true. Not that the actual results or the elements in reality show us that, or the experience, the consequences of those things show us the truth, what has actually happened. It's that they think that they get to claim that they have a monopoly over what truth actually is. And I'm not saying that this is true because I say it's true. It is true beyond whether I say it or not. It has nothing to do with me. So in alignment with this conference, this is the S.E.E.D truth method. The S.E.E.D truth method is the arduous task of planting seeds of truth into the minds of those who are sorely lacking in that knowledge, and hope that they may fertilize those seeds to reap the fruits of that knowledge. The S.E.E.D truth method has been used throughout all of human history as a means of preservation for the sacred knowledge that helps to evolve the species into a higher type. It is the most important when it comes to planting the seeds of truth in progeny for posterity. We must not let our expectations of what others will do with the seed to prevent us from planting the seed. Never underestimate the power of planting a seed of truth in a fertile mind. I see this far too often with people where they get very discouraged from planting seeds of truth because some people just don't fertilize those seeds. They don't take care of them. And you just can't have that expectation of like what people are going to do with what you tell them, with those seeds. You got to give it to them and then let it be. You know, you can't get into the emotional idea of, oh, they didn't do anything with it. Why am I doing this? You just got to plant it and then let it be. Some will sprout and some won't. And you will see that. And the ones who sprout, you'll be very thankful for seeing that. And the ones who don't, well, just let it go. Don't get all caught up in the emotional drama of that. So, education versus indoctrination. Obviously, we are living in a world right now filled with indoctrination, with mind control. Indoctrination means to conform a person or group to not challenge and accept as truth a set of beliefs, axioms that are fundamentally dogmatic. The idea here is to make sure that nobody challenges the dogma of the state or of religious institutionalized belief systems so that those can continue to go on. So, indoctrination is about getting you to conform to a set of ideas that are dogmatic so that you do not challenge it, that you do not seek the actual truth. You just blindly believe it. A working definition for indoctrination is a mind control technique to condition a person to only repeat the information provided to them by authority figures, to be molded into a person who cannot critically think and challenge the state-approved dogma, one who does not think outside prescribed consensus of authority and government-funded science or scientism. And as the great George Carlin said, when your education limits your imagination, it's called indoctrination. So literally it is the death of imagination. You can't think, you can't imagine anything else besides what they've given you. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And as one of our other founding fathers said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So what's true education? A lot of people don't understand what true education actually is. So what is true education? A lot of people confuse indoctrination with actual education. It has nothing to do with your degrees or any papers that you have to prove that you've been educated by the state. That's not true education. I mean, you can get some education there, but most of it is, government funded indoctrination to make you believe in a set of dogmatic ideas. So let's look at the word education. The etymological definition of the word education is derived from the Latin presupposition or e, meaning out of, and the Latin verb ducere. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I could be wrong. Meaning to lead. So it means to lead out of. To lead somebody out of what? The process of education is an alchemical transformation of one's own ignorance, meaning darkness, into knowledge, meaning light. True education is that of a process of illumination. It is the ever-progressive journey of raising one's own consciousness into a higher state so that they can make better use of their psyche and the tools in which they were gifted with from creation. So it literally means out of darkness into light. Education means coming out of darkness of ignorance and into the light of knowledge. And I used here the Freemasonic first degree tracing board. And for those who have been initiated, especially into Freemasonry, they will understand why I have used this degree and this tracing board, because it literally is an allegorical, artistic statement of the alchemical transformation of one coming out of darkness into light, coming off the checkerboard floor of ignorance and internal duality up to the light of knowledge. So, what is one of the main problems with education? Well, obviously, it is the blind belief in authority and Obviously another reason why is because these 1% ruling class have control over all the apparatuses of education. But let's just say even in homeschooling, what is another problem with the educational method that we have? Well, one reason that it fails so much is because it does not delve or dive deeply into the mystery traditions. It does not take us through the initiation process into the ancient mystery schools and into the true knowledge of things like natural law, morality, and the other amazing, mysteries and the plethora of knowledge that has been laid down by the great researchers that have come before us. So the mystery schools were in a set of 7 at later on, but at first there was only a set of 3. These are the 3 primary ones that I chose to go with. Kabbalah, which is on the far left with the Tree of Life, and then you have Freemasonry in the middle, and then you have the Tarot, the Book of the Tarot. All these are archetypal, allegorical representations of the journey of the self. And this is about symbolic literacy. And that's one of the major things that modern education tries to eradicate from an individual's mind. They want to make you symbol illiterate rather than make you symbol literate. And they want to push you into a left brain imbalance mainly. Become a drone, make you a dunce, really. So Kabbalah is an amazing tradition, and I highly recommend that each person study all 3 of these in conjunction. You cannot understand these without studying all 3 of these together. But if you notice here that you have very similar archetypal representations, you have the 3 columns in the Tree of Life of the Kabbalah. You have the 3 pillars in the first degree tracing board. And then you also have 2 pillars and then a third, which could be looked at as a pillar, the sacred feminine goddess in the middle of the high priestess card of the tarot. But if you look behind her, there is also a tree of life, which represents the Kabbalistic tree. These are all saying the same thing. These are all ubiquitous within their symbolism at the allegorical level. I'm not going to explain all these because this presentation is supposed to be pretty short, but I guarantee that when you start to open these up, you will understand why it is so important to integrate the mystery schools and mystery traditions into the educational method. Without these, we are just going to continue to do the same things over and over in our society and continue to get the same results. This is why these traditions have been so eradicated and frowned upon by religious institutions and by dogmatic belief systems and dogmatic people of this world. But yes, one of the biggest issues is that we do not integrate a symbolic, archetypal, progressive initiation for the students to come out of darkness into light. And that's what the mystery schools were about. They were about bringing an individual out of darkness and into the light of knowledge, into the light of understanding themselves and understanding the environment that they are in. And there are many rites and rituals that one must go through to understand these things. And they are very important. What is a mystery school? By definition, a mystery school is a body of initiates who have dedicated themselves to preserving, protecting, and perpetuating the mystery teachings, especially that of natural law. Throughout the ages, the mystery schools have hidden in plain sight the most important and crucial information for the uplift of human consciousness and the evolution of the species. They have built sacred temples all over the world and provided services both to the public and behind closed doors for only those who have eyes to see and those who have ears to hear. The initiates are those who are known as the guardians, the protectors, the light bearers, the teachers, the healers, the record keepers, the magicians, and the watchers, among many other names. The modern mystery school is an international community of light workers initiated into the ancient tradition of service to truth, compassion, and empowerment. They believe in the axiom of or maxim of know thyself and you will know the universe. To know yourself is to know others. To know the universe is to know God. By whichever name you choose to use, being whether you want to use God or you can use whatever. I'm sure there's quite a few atheists that will have an issue with my presentation. But yes, I am not an atheist by any means, and atheism is a failure in consciousness. And I will be explaining that in a future presentation. Each mystery school's primary duty is to protect the ancient system of enlightenment, healing, manifestation, and transformation so that they can continue to be practiced and shared today, specifically for progeny and posterity. These ancient brotherhoods and sisterhoods serve the truth and the one great spirit by offering their services from the gnosis of their own experiences to all those who wish to broaden their understanding of themselves in the realm in which they operate. So it's very important to understand that if you come to them and ask, specifically with the light occultists and light occultism schools, you will be granted that knowledge. You will have access to that knowledge, unlike the dark occult. The dark occultists will not grant you the highest levels of the mystery schools. They will not give you access to that. Without injecting the mystery teachings into a newly emergent educational model, we will not see any type of true paradigm shift. That's what all the light workers are trying to truly do, is bring all this knowledge into a synthesis so that we can really, preserve, protect, and perpetuate this knowledge out, especially to the youth. And that is for all of progeny and for the betterment of posterity, obviously. So I don't believe we will have any great change until we see the mystery schools reemerge in a very healthy fashion, especially when it comes to homeschooling. And obviously, when it comes to modern education, we need to get far and far, very far away from that, obviously. We need to get very, very far away from the modern indoctrinational system, which is just nothing but a bunch of mind control. And we need to decentralize this information. So as Manly P. Hall put it, the preeminence of any philosophical system can be determined only by the excellence of its products. The mysteries have demonstrated the superiority of their culture by giving to the world minds of such overwhelming greatness, souls of such beatific vision, and lives of such outstanding impeccability that even after a lapse of ages, the teachings of these individuals constitute the present spiritual, intellectual, and ethical standards of the race. And it's also true, vice versa, that the present ethical standards or moral standards of our race has come from the minds of dogma from the past. So what happened to the mysteries? Well, one reason is the mob destroyed the mysteries. This is not the totality of the reasons that the mysteries have been pretty much obliterated. Obviously, there's a lot to this, and it's very sophisticated, but this is one reason that I'm going to point out. One reason is because it was due to the mob that the mysteries were mishandled and ripped out of the temples by force. Of course, we should all have access to this knowledge, but with this knowledge comes great responsibility to treat it with care and ensure that it is not destroyed for future generations. Unfortunately, this was not the case when it was taken from the temples, and due to this lack of responsibility, we are now worse off, in my opinion, than we were when it was kept in the hands of the occultists and the esoteric teachers. Imagine if the mob went to Harvard and demanded for their PhD in neurology, and then without ever learning how to handle that knowledge or learning the knowledge itself, started to do neurosurgery on people using their papers as credentials to boast that they know what they are doing. What would unfold from this? Undoubtedly, it would lead to lots of death and suffering onto the people that they practice neurology onto, or neurosurgery onto. I'm not saying that the knowledge should be withheld, but I am saying there is a reason for an intuitive structure to teach us the knowledge and how to be responsible with it. The knowledge belongs to all of humanity, and it is our personal responsibility to keep it intact for the well being of all life. The knowledge has to be completely distributed freely to the masses, including those who may use it for negative purposes, to help balance out the equation of the extreme power differential between those who hold the knowledge and those who do not. Unlike the past light occultists, our job is now to ensure that the knowledge is preserved by decentralization. The knowledge belongs to all of humanity, not one group or individual. So, my point with this slide is that with this knowledge, we have to understand there was a means for a hierarchical structure to teach individuals how to preserve and how to distribute the knowledge properly. And that's what we need to do. We need to understand how to handle the knowledge so that it is not misused by ourselves. It is our responsibility to not misuse the knowledge. And we really need to fully grasp what that means and take full accountability for what we are doing with what we know. So the next part of the presentation is called axiomatic premises. So what is an axiom? An axiom comes from the Latin word axioma, which means authority, literally, that which is thought worthy or fit. Axiom, a fundamental belief that is widely accepted as true because it is perceived to either be self-evident or particularly useful to those who accept it. So when it comes to axioms, they can be in alignment with truth or they could be far out of alignment with truth. So we need to understand that this is a fundamental part of our belief systems. It's like a belief that has been firmly calcified in the mind that we are absolutely going to behave off of. So what we need to do is we need to align our axioms, our belief systems, completely with objective truth for us to create that which we say we want. And to do that, our axioms should be based upon 4 basic, fundamental philosophical concepts. And these are the 4 branches of philosophy. So the word philosophy literally means love for wisdom. Philos means love, and then Sophia means wisdom. So we have these 4 branches of philosophy, and people who have studied philosophy should readily know these branches. We have epistemology, we have logic and reasoning, we have metaphysics or ontology, we have ethics and axiology. So these are the 4 basic branches of philosophy. Now I'm not going to explain all of these. We will cover epistemology a little bit in this one. But when I do an extended presentation on this on the Cubbyhole website, I will be going and breaking all 4 of these down. So the role of epistemology. Well, what does the word epistemology mean? Epistemology is from Greek episteme, which means knowledge, and in ology it means the study of. So it's the study of knowledge. Epistemology is the study of the nature and grounds of knowledge, especially with reference to its limits, validity, and scope. Epistemology is an investigation of what distinguishes justified knowledge from opinion. So what it is it shows how much can we really know, whether knowledge actually exists or not, and can we share knowledge. So having a firm basis in epistemology gets us out of the psychopathology of solipsism. Solipsism being the idea that you are alone by yourself and you cannot share any knowledge and everything is a figment of your own mind. Solus ipse, meaning alone by the self, and everything is created from your monad mind. that you pretty much are God of all things, and that all other things are an illusion of your mind. And if you shared anything that you knew, you're just sharing it to yourself. So why even do that? Why do anything? Because, there's no point in doing anything. So for more information on this, you can go to my first presentation. But a great allegory for understanding the basis of epistemology is Plato's allegory of the cave, where we have individuals trapped in a cave, and you have a depiction of this on the right hand side of the screen here. And they are locked in chains looking at a wall, and there's a fire, and then they have these shapes being projected on the wall from objects behind them, and they don't know that these objects are there. They think that the actual shadows on the walls, the shapes that the shadows are taking, are literally reality. And that's what they believe that reality actually is, when in fact they are believing in an illusion. So, one of these individuals actually gets out and realizes that this is an illusion. And on his escape from this cave, he comes to the light, and at first he's blinded, and it hurts, because the truth hurts when you first see the light. It blinds you for a moment. You're in shock because of that. And then he proceeds to try to go and awaken the other people in the cave and get them out of this madness that they're in. And just like it happens with us as the great workers, as light builders, people think you're crazy. They're like, no, that's not true. This is reality. These shadows on the wall are reality. So I highly recommend any individual studying philosophy to look in the allegory of the cave. There's a lot more to it, but that's just a simple version of that. And obviously I'm skimming through this stuff pretty quickly because, I could make this 4 hours long, but I have a short time period to be able to get through all these. So the role of epistemology is crucial for those who seek to understand truth and natural law, for it deals with the fundamental justifications for the objective nature of reality. It is the basis of our temple of knowledge from which all of our assertions are built upon. Thus, why the dark occult and those who are the victims perpetuate a false ideological idea about epistemology. The main purpose of epistemology is to understand whether or not knowledge of the physical world and the metaphysical spiritual world can be held as a firm basis for our worldviews. It is intended to educate us of the truth and to dissolve our solipsistic illusions and ego illusions of the way we want things to be compared to how they actually are. This line of thought deals with questions such as, what is knowledge? How can it be justified? How can we actually know? Can knowledge be shared? What is the purpose of knowledge, and why do we know? So a great allegory that's very similar to the allegory of the cave is the Matrix. And when he first is logged out of the Matrix and they're doing rehabilitation on his muscles and on his body and on his mind, he wakes and he opens his eyes and he says, why do my eyes hurt so much? Neo wakes up and says that. And Morpheus says, because you've never used them before. This is how most people are. Their eyes are atrophied. They've never used them before. Before we can break out of prison, we must first realize that we are caged. Okay? So, that's the whole thing here. If you don't realize you're in a cage, if you've been so conditioned that you think that the condition of slavery is actually freedom, then why would you ever fight for freedom? You think you are free. You don't know any better. You've never used your eyes. You think what you see is the reality of the situation. One of the problems with epistemology, especially when it pertains to modern philosophy, is that it has been balkanized. So this is called balkanization of epistemology. Balkanization means to take a geographical region and split it up into fractures, like fracture it into different components. Pretty much it's a divide and conquer method. So you fracture a geographical region, a country, into smaller states, and then they fight amongst each other because they all have different moral codes based upon moral relativity, or different standards for their laws and their belief systems. So this is a great divide and conquer methodology. But how does this apply to epistemology? Well, the knowledge itself of philosophy has been balkanized across the world. It has been fractured. This is one way that the dark occultists keep themselves in power, by keeping the knowledge divided in our minds. So this is why we must create a synthesis with all this knowledge, especially when it pertains to the mystery schools and our origins. Due to the balkanization of epistemology, humanity has been led into a position where synthesizing the fragmented pieces of true knowledge is our moral responsibility, and one of the most arduous tasks that we must undertake. This process was done intentionally by those who hold this knowledge in order to keep humanity in a state of ignorance that it is currently in. It is literally the divide and conquer strategy through the level of information we have access to. By keeping the information divided and fractured, it ensures that humanity will be in a cycle of bickering over the trivialities, while the dark occult continue to push forward with their agenda and of world domination. This is one of the biggest issues in philosophy, is that modern circles of philosophical discussion, nobody ever comes to the objective truth or conclusion, or a conclusive place of understanding. Rather, this incorrect approach to philosophy is simply empty, rhetorical, or rhetoric that does not get us the answers that we need. Apologize for not getting through that very well, but the point is that in modern philosophy, we just see these never-ending debates specifically about whether God exists or not. But they do have never-ending debates about ethical theories, about ontology, about the nature of reason, about the nature of knowledge. And, these debates have led us to come to an understanding of quite a few things. But it's simply a lot of rhetoric, empty rhetoric specifically now, because all the answers to these questions have already been answered for thousands of years, and we're still asking the same questions. We've never grown beyond this stuff. And why is that? Well, it's because these things have never been fully flushed out and fully integrated into a world philosophy, because it's all fractured. It's all been divided. And it has never been used to create a fundamental worldview for all of humanity. That is the truth within these debates or these discussions about these ideas. So, yeah, sometimes you do come to the truth, and you do find some people in philosophical circles that actually do have some real knowledge, because they finally have, opened their eyes, and their eyes have turned on. Their third eye specifically has turned on, and they understand these things. But most of them still dabble in the idea of whether reality actually exists or not, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. So it's very important to study these things, especially when it comes to trying to make a change in the world, because without tackling these ideas, then we really aren't going to change anything, because what we're changing is truly in the mind. That's what we have to change, is the mind, to change the physical reality. And we have to get our epistemology straight to change the mind. And one way of doing that is by synthesizing all the knowledge, by reconstructing all the knowledge back into one tapestry. And that's kind of what we're all doing here today. And some of this is done through gnosis. So what is the role of gnosis? Well, what is gnosis? Gnosis means direct knowledge through personal experience, as opposed to knowledge that we are told or believe in through other people's experiences, or things that we read in books and stuff like that. Gnosis is conscious experiential knowledge, not merely intellectual data or conceptual ideas, beliefs, or theories. The role of gnosis is an evolutionary process of ascension and consciousness. It helps us to shape our character and our overall moral integrity. Gnosis is not only an intellectual experience, but also an intuitive experience, which both must strike a balance with each other in harmony with nature itself to receive the full benefits and gifts from the divine. So, gnosis literally means knowledge, but it's a specific type of knowledge. It is direct knowledge. It's knowledge that you have experienced for yourself. It's like you putting your hand on a stove that's hot and understanding that it burns. You have direct knowledge of that now. Now you absolutely know. The thing with gnosis is that this is why I added the intuitive part of the experience in here. There's a part of consciousness that doesn't want us to constantly repeat the same mistakes over and over and over. And there's a intuitive part of us that allows us to know, hey, we shouldn't do that. And the reason why is because humanity has experienced this at a certain level, and it's been epigenetically written into our being to a level that we can access that experience at a certain level. And this is so we don't constantly repeat the same things over and over for all of time, for all of eternity. To gain access to this, though, some call it the Akashic Records, some call it the field or the ether. There's many different names for it. The quintessence, but some people can access this. We all can access this. It's a part of our fundamental being, but we have to fully awaken. We have to align our chakras. We have to balance our hemispheres. We really have to get in alignment with ourselves and with nature itself. And then we can access this deeper part of the experiences that our ancestors had. And that way we don't have to suffer the same things over and over and over for all eternity. Yeah, there's a point for going through trial and error as a child, but at a certain level, once you've grown out of that, for the betterment of the all, for the ascension of the entire species, there's also a part of us that gives us access to that file set of data from our history, our ancestral history of experiences that allows us to move forward. So that's part of our collective gnosis that we have to tap into. And I really enjoy this depiction of a being who is obviously suffering, and then his astral spirit, or his true being, his higher self, is ascending up with his wings spread wide. And I just really love this depiction, because that's what real gnosis is, coming out of that state of being in that lower vibration into that higher vibration, and raising up and flying and gliding up high into the light. So as Plato says, ignorance is the root and stem of every evil. So we must get ourselves out of ignorance. We have to stop ignoring the information that is crucial to our benefit and to our well-being. So we are in a collective state of cognitive dissonance. And this is something that must be mended. I'm sure that all of us have experienced cognitive dissonance in one way, shape, or form or another. So what is cognitive dissonance? Cognitive dissonance is a state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude change. Cognitive dissonance occurs when a person holds contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values, and is typically experienced as psychological stress when they participate in an action that goes against one or more of them. The discomfort is triggered by the person's belief clashing with the new information perceived, wherein they try to find a way to resolve the contradiction to reduce their discomfort. In this condition, when two actions or ideas are not psychologically consistent with each other, it is the individual's responsibility to become consistent and non-contradictory. So this is when we do things different than how we feel or how we think, or we hold an idea and we believe in an idea, but then new information comes to our mind and we know it to be true, but yet we still continue to hold that idea as true that we know, which is not true. So we're holding something that is true and not true at the same time and trying to use that as a fundamental ideology to work from. It is literally internal dualism where the mind is in a schism. And from this, we create lots of suffering. So I got this funny meme on the right side here. Is your brain uncomfortable? Could you be wrong? Is your mind stressed? Try cognitive dissonance dissipator. And it's like an ad for some kind of medicine or some type of remedy for your cognitive dissonance. So I thought it was kind of funny. So Frantz Fanon said, sometimes people who hold a core belief that is very strong, when they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable and called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit with the core belief. So that's what I'm saying, is that you provide new information, and let's say like the state is an immoral condition that must be done away with because it's based on duress and coercion, and somebody holds that fundamentally and emotionally very close to their heart and very deeply in their mind. And no matter how much evidence you give them to show that that is the truth of the matter, they still won't believe it because it contradicts their fundamental ideology that is erroneous and dogmatic. Which leads me into the next section, which is critical thinking and feeling. We always hear about critical thinking, but what about critical feeling? We have lost touch with our true care, and due to this, we allow far too much evil to run amok in our world. We have become addicted to apathy and selfishness because it is comfortable for us to stay in those conditions, which in the long run does nothing but cause more suffering. We need to reactivate our conscience and start to critically feel again about the issues taking place in the world. This is the process of awakening, for it is the only path to gaining the emotions that are required to push us into change. So we must balance the cerebral cortex, the cerebral part of ourselves, the two hemispheres, with the heart. And this is known as heart-based consciousness. We have to have a balance between the heart and the brain. That is what we need. So we can't just be, thinkers. We have to be feelers. We have to activate our heart-based consciousness. And I feel that that is one of the failures of a lot of people, is that they just don't care. This state of apathy is one of the issues in our world. This is also known as internal opposition. And this is when the heart and the mind are contradictory to each other, or internal dualism, where we feel one thing and we think another. And we need to bring a balance between those two things. A balance must be struck between the heart and brain. This is what is known as heart-based consciousness. It is when we have harmonized or resonated our biology with our higher mind. Far too often are we in an internal state of dualism when our heart and brain are having a communication breakdown between the two. So we need communication, synthesis, or unity between the heart and brain. Non-contradiction between thoughts and emotions is one of the things that we need. Non-contradiction between the sacred masculine thoughts and the sacred feminine emotional sides of our consciousness. So what are the main steps to problem solving? 1. We must become conscious that there is a problem. We must be aware and fully recognize that there is an issue taking place. To do this, we must conquer our fear of the negative or the fear-based denial of the problem in order to take the required steps to solving the problem. 2. We must come to the knowledge that the symptoms are just the effect of an underlying root cause. Therefore, we must realize treating the symptoms will never solve the problem. In order to do this, we must make an accurate and efficient diagnosis of the cause of the problem. The implementation of a solution, which is number 3, requires a knowledge acquired by an accurate diagnosis. We then must take the required action necessary to rectify the causal factor which has led to the manifest result of the problem. So this is very important to understand, and I'm sure a lot of people here do understand this. To actually change the issue, we can never start from the realm of the effect. We have to start from the realm of causality, meaning we must first trace it back through the symptoms, through the effects, to the cause, and then work from there. This is a great quote by Travis Walton. I've come to realize that the biggest problem anywhere in the world is that people's perceptions of reality are compulsively filtered through the screening mesh of what they want and do not want to be true. So a lot of people are in a lot of deep states of denial when it comes to the current problems of our world. The law of manifestation. Since human beings do not already have the things they say they want or need, it follows logically and reasonably that the knowledge of the requirements to obtaining those things they say they want or need either must be absent, or if present, that knowledge is being ignored. As long as this knowledge continues to remain unknown or ignored, the manifestation of the desired conditions will be impossible. We all claim we want certain conditions to be manifested into reality, such as love, peace, health, and freedom. Yet we continuously keep getting the opposite at the aggregate level. This is because we are not united in our task for meeting the specific requirements to manifest those conditions. If those requirements are not met, those conditions will never manifest. So the reason why I titled this The Law of Manifestation is because the true law of manifestation is meeting the requirements to manifest those things. If we do not manifest those things, it means that we have not met the requirements to manifest those things. So here is a simple graph of a law of manifestation. At the bottom, with the red cube, we start with knowledge or lack thereof. This is the level of available information. This constitutes all potential forms of data that may be gathered, processed, understood, and acted upon by individuals. Moving up, we have understanding or lack thereof. We either understand that knowledge or we do not. This is the decision-making processing level. So this is the level of processing all the available information which takes place within the human mind and becomes the life choices of each individual. And then we move into wisdom, the green cube, or lack thereof. Do we actually have wisdom or not? Wisdom is the correct action from correctly understanding the knowledge that we have. And this is the level of human behavior. Each individual's behavior is based upon the quality of their decision-making processes, which in turn are based upon the quality of their available information. And then we move into the manifest reality. This is the condition of society at the aggregate level, the result or consequence from our behavior. Do we have the things we say we want, such as freedom, or not, such as slavery? The quality of the condition which is manifested in any given society is based upon the aggregate quality of behaviors within that society. So it stands logically that to actually get what we say we want, we have to start at the bottom of these building blocks. We have to start with knowledge, the available information, and that is what the SEED conference is all about, providing the information that is needed for individuals to make a good decision-making process and then correctly understand that and then apply that into reality so that they can create wisdom in their own lives and then create a better outcome in society and in the world. So some people may know this method as the trivium method. And this is just a simple breakdown of what the trivium is. I highly recommend that all the students of the mysteries dive deeply into the trivium methodology. Trivium means the three pathways or the three roads. So you have the classical trivium, which is grammar, logic, and then rhetoric. You have the esoteric trivium, which is knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. That's kind of what we just went over. And you have the modern trivium, which is input, processing, and output. And we kind of just went over that as well. So think of it as like a computer. You put the data in, the computer processes it, and then it is projected onto the screen or the output device, such as a printer. And here is a simple breakdown of the way the trivium works. At the top, you have the scene, or the effect, what has been manifested. And this is kind of like a strange loop or a feedback loop within reality. So you have 1, grammar, input, data, knowledge, or reality input, what's coming from reality. And then we have the mind, which is where everything is caused at, because the mind is all. So what generated it? But this is also in the monad mind where we process and understand things. So this is 2, logic, the unseen. It's in the unseen realm. And then we have back into reality, output into reality, which is 3, which is rhetoric, output, action, wisdom, or back to the effect, what has been manifested. So this is the trifold unity of learning. Very simple. And this is a very important quote by Marcus Aurelius. If anyone can show me and prove to me that I am wrong in thought or deed, I will gladly change. I seek the truth, which never yet hurt anybody. It is only persistence in self-delusion and ignorance which does harm. And I tell this to people constantly. If you can prove to me I am wrong, I will gladly change my thoughts and my mindsets. And I think this is, one of the issues with a lot of people is that after they have been proven wrong, they're in that cognitive dissonance and they will not change because they are egoly fixated on being emotionally identified with their previous behaviors. So one of the major issues in the world is people are always trying to treat the symptoms of the causal factor rather than getting to the actual root cause. One of the major issues with people when they are trying to create great change in the world is that they lack the understanding of cause and effect. Most are constantly trying to change the causality through the symptoms with the effects. There is absolutely no power to affect change from the level of symptoms, but this is where the aggregate of human consciousness is stuck or imprisoned. To change the symptoms, we must get to the root causality of the problem. All power to effect change lies in the plane of causality. Thus, this is where human consciousness must go. The plane of causality constitutes the plane of mentality. It is the plane of mentalism, or the mind. The plane of causality is where all things in which we are speaking are set into motion prior to manifesting as form realities or into the physical world. The plane of causality constitutes the why, or the underlying causal factor which precedes all manifested things and events. So it has to do with the why. Why is this taking place? And I think this is a great image of an individual standing between a circle of dominoes, and he's pushing over the dominoes, and eventually that effect will come back and knock him in the back of the head. So cause and effect is separated by time and space. So this is the thing that people don't realize, especially when it comes to karma, is that it takes time for that effect to come back around and then hit us. This is why we are just now experiencing a lot of the aggregate issues that we are, because a lot of these causes were set into motion in our past, and now we're suffering from that. It doesn't happen instantaneously at the aggregate level. It takes time to build up before that effect comes back around. So we really need to understand that, let's say if we did a wrongdoing and karma came in and dropped an anvil on somebody's head, usually somebody could correlate that, oh, I did something wrong, I harmed somebody, and then this happened to me because of that, because it happened instantaneously. But since karma doesn't work instantaneously in the majority, it does sometimes, but normally it doesn't, especially at the aggregate level. People don't connect the wrongdoing with the harm that happens to them later on. It's just a disconnection or disassociation of the events. And that's one of the issues when it comes to karma, because they're not understanding and using pattern recognition to see, oh, okay, I did this in the past and now I'm receiving this in the future, in my present. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. That is the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. Thomas Jefferson. So that's what this whole presentation and the whole conference is about, is educating the masses. One of the biggest weapons of manipulation that we see in the world is controlled opposition. To understand how mind control works, you must understand the Hegelian dialectic. In today's world, we see an outbreak of infectious geopolitical propaganda that is being used to manipulate consciousness of that society at a collective level. This is the works of the social engineers of our day that purposely create and design the majority of these problems, anticipating in advance the reaction of the people that these techniques are used against. This is what is called the problem reaction solution scenario. Though the solution presented is always about more control through violence, and it is not intended to solve the root causal factor of the problem, but only to serve as a basis to exacerbate the existing problem. This process is repeated over and over, all the time moving the society towards whatever goal or endpoint the ruling class have as their agenda. So, the problem reaction solution scenario is simply the thesis, antithesis, or antithesis, and then synthesis idea. They create a problem, let's say like a false flag or a terror event, fake or real, because we have a lot of those right now where it is blurring the lines between fiction and reality when it comes to false flags. And then we have the antithesis of that, which would be the reaction from the people to that problem. And then the people who created that problem come in and say, here is the solution to that problem. But that solution is an artificial synthesis because it is something that they have already predetermined and pre-planned to be, something that's going to help their agenda. It might resolve a little bit of the issue, but ultimately it just leads to more control. Just like all these new draconian laws that we see being set into place every single day, especially through the past couple years. There's a problem like with gun control, right? There's mass shootings, and they created these issues, and then they come in and say more gun laws, more gun control. And this is a problem reaction scenario. And it's also a form of emotional mind control because they're trying to play off of the sympathy of the people, their emotions, so that they can emotionally manipulate the individuals into thinking that this is going to be a real solution by coming in and taking individuals' guns. And absolutely it's not. It just makes everything far worse. And I'm sure everybody here who's listening knows this as a fact. So, Hegelian dialectic. This is a George Frederick Hegel, and I do recommend looking into his work. There is a proper use for the Hegelian dialectic. It is something that we should have under our belts as a means for learning. But as a means of manipulation, it is an amazing tool for the dark occultists to get done what they want to get done, and we see this all over the board. So here's a good definition for the Hegelian dialectic. The framework for guiding our thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to a predetermined solution. This is accomplished by manipulating consciousness into a circular pattern of thought and action which never lead to a true solution. The synthetic solution to these conflicts can't be introduced unless those being manipulated take sides that will advance the predetermined agenda. This is about the political party taking sides, the left versus the right, or any of these small political ideologies and groupings that are taking place on the left and right that have been fractured and divided to such a degree that they just constantly bicker and fight with each other and violently attack each other. And none of these people understand natural law. None of these people truly understand what a right actually is, which is an action that does not cause harm to a sentient being. To effectively control a nation and its people, allow them a little hope by offering them a choice of two parties that they would like to submit their will to, encouraging debate only within a limited scope of the two-party illusion. They will keep going around in circles, arguing between themselves, while the hidden controllers implement their agendas regardless of which party is in power. Truly, both politics are two wings of the same body. It is a place that looks like you have two different options, like two hallways to choose from, but in truth it leads you to the same destination, which is the slaughterhouse, which is more slavery and more control. So it's political polarization. It's the illusion of free choice. And people who still believe in government or believe in either party are still under mind control. That's just all there is to it. There is no other way around it. If you believe that these parties are actually different at some level, then you still are under some form of mind control. They act like they are their enemies. They act like they're enemies of each other, but in truth, they are just buddy behind the scenes shaking hands, making money, and really the real money for them is the control of population. And really they're just the puppets on the statecraft, the stagecraft. They are the people weaving the magic and the sorcery over the other individuals who blindly believe what is being fed to them through the mass media on television. The biggest lie box that has ever been created. So the two-party illusion is one of the biggest issues that we see. And, just to add in a little extra here, the idea of voting is actually not a right when it comes to voting for things that violate other people's liberties. And the word vote literally means to pledge allegiance to a deity or to a god, to make a promise to a deity or a god. So we can see that, the whole idea of the state is actually a religion, a false dogmatic religion there to bind us and thwart us from forward progression in consciousness and as a society, to make sure that the people in power at the top of the pyramid continue to be in power and they continue to remain in that position, so that they can have what they want and keep us, subservient to their draconian ways. The blind co-creators of reality. The mass majority of the people in the world are blind to the overarching agenda of the dark occult. At this stage, since the information is widely available, the mass majority of individuals have willfully kept their blindfolds on in a sheer act of ignorance in order for them to stay comfortably numb and to accept the default condition of suffering and slavery. The problem with this is that the society and culture is directed by the masses, and since they are not capable of seeing, they are blindly co creating a reality that is in opposition to what they say they want. When the blind lead the blind, the world is filled with casualties. So, this is really what we have right now. This is how groupthink works. And it's very easy to control groups. All you have to do is give them a little nudge with a certain idea, and then it spreads like wildfire in these people's minds, and then they start leading other people and convincing other people, and people just don't do their due diligence, and they don't have a high enough or reasoning skills to be able to discern the difference between truth and falsehood, and they get caught up in this political fervor or emotional fervor, and they want to create change. People have an idea of wanting to do good things in the world, but in truth, they're not doing anything good because they're being led by people who are blinded, and they're going to walk straight off a cliff into jagged rocks at the bottom, and they're leading other people, including their own children, off that cliff because they don't know what they're doing. But in truth, they do have a responsibility for this because they are willfully keeping the blindfolds on at this point. The knowledge is widespread now. There is no reason for the masses of humanity to not have this knowledge and to not know what is truly happening. They literally have blindfolded themselves at this point because of their cognitive dissonance and because they want to remain comfortably numb in this state of, conformity, because it's painful. Because when you look at the truth of what's going on in the condition of humanity, it means that you have to actually do something. You actually have to take responsibility for where you're contributing to that. And then you also have to realize your moral obligation to change yourself and to admit to yourself that you're wrong and to help change the world because of that. One of the other major problems that I see is that people just don't read. And if they are reading, they're absolutely reading the wrong things, and they're not using their reasoning to discern and filter through the inaccuracies or do comparative research. Comparative research is one of the most important things to do when you're, looking up stuff on the internet or reading blogs or even reading books. But one thing I like to say is that you need to read the books from the dark occultists themselves. You need to read the publications from the enemies, because then you'll get an idea about their mindset. And a lot of people do not read those things. They do not put their time into that, and they probably don't even know where to look for that. But trust me, they're out there, and the dark occultists rely upon people not reading those things. That's why they can just publish them freely. It doesn't matter to them because they put the agendas right out in the open for people to see. So why read? This question is like asking why we should breathe or drink water. Reading is the nutrition of the mind. It expands our consciousness to new dimensions that we could have never seen without reading. We can experience the vastness of the minds of humanity through reading, and thus, in doing so, gain more understanding about ourselves and the world. Books are not absolutely dead things. They contain a potency of life in them to be as activated as to be as active as the soul that wrote them. They preserve, as in a vial, the purest efficacy and extraction of that human intelligence and experience that bred them. Only the very weak-minded refuse to be influenced by literature and poetry, and those minds are easily manipulated. If anything, the main reason to read is so that you are not controlled. You do not have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading them. Through this, you can control the masses without ever understanding how and why they are in the condition that they are in. Think before you speak, read before you think. Read everything. Trash, classics, good and bad, and see how they do it. Just like a carpenter who works as an apprentice and studies the master. You just need to start filtering through it all. Like I do recommend to be careful about your sources, but at the same time, as long as you have a high enough discernment faculty and your ability to do comparative research, then read it all. Read as much as possible, and you will gain the benefits from that no matter what. But we definitely do need to understand that we don't have a lot of time. So, reading the correct things will definitely help put you on the fast track to understanding what's going on in the world. But yeah, reading is one of the most crucial things, and people do not read anymore. And it's absolutely insane. I think it's one of the most insane things ever in this world. A capacity and taste for reading gives access to whatever has already been discovered by others. It is the key, or one of those keys, to the already solved problems. And not only so, it gives a relish, a facility for successfully pursuing the yet unsolved ones. Abraham Lincoln. Presuppositional worldviews. So, when it comes to presuppositional worldviews, what do I mean? I mean the presupposed ideas that our worldviews have. So, whenever we're dealing with a lot of our assertions about the nature and grounds of reality, knowledge, the self, the ontological questions about the nature of who we are, our purpose, etc., there are foundational presupposed ideas that we build upon that we are not normally conscious of. They are stored within the subconscious mind, and they help to guide us with our actions. And one thing that I see is that this also plays into that cognitive dissonance role where we are saying and doing things contradictory to, you know, specifically saying things contradictory to our presuppositional worldviews. Presuppositional worldviews are the precognitive assumptions that are part of the programming of our subconscious mind that guide our behaviors normally without us being aware of them. The most simple example of this is to show it in an apophatic method, which means a method of negation. When one states there is no such thing as truth, the presuppositional idea underlying the statement is that it is true there is no such thing as truth, thus dismantling the entire conclusion based upon the presupposition and the inherent reality of the objectivity of that truth. If it is true there is no such thing as truth, then there is such a thing as truth, making the argument or assertion self-defeating. If the statement is false, then there is also such a thing as truth. Either way you go, you end up back that there is an objective truth. These types of presuppositions go unrecognized when most people assert certain concepts. It is very important and crucial for one to take a step backwards in their conceptual ideas to understand the firm basis of the idea or the concept being proposed. We can go on and on with numerous examples of these types of fallacies or fallacious dogmatic assertions that do nothing but hold us back and impede the reasoning and logical skills of humanity. So there are all kinds of these examples, such as, let's say, an atheist uses logic to come to, well, I wouldn't really call it logic. It's not real logic, but they assume that they're using logic to come to the idea that there is no such thing as God, or here's a better one, that that all of creation is in a chaotic state, that nothing can be orderly, that everything is based off chaos, right? And there's arguments against what I'm going to say here because this isn't the absolute of all atheism, but this is one thing that I've dealt with and debated many atheists on. So they are using the idea that they can come to an orderly conclusion through logic to say that all things are non-orderly, which is a contradiction in their presuppositional ideas, and it's a contradiction of the objective truth of the matter. So, we could go on and on, like I said, about these presuppositional worldviews. But, whenever somebody says there's no such thing as truth, just ask them, is that true that there's no such thing as truth? And if so, then it is self defeating. And if not, then there is such a thing as truth. Either way that you go down that path, you cannot escape that. Breaking through the illusions. It is our personal responsibility to break through the illusions of the ego barriers in order to see the objective truth of reality. Shattering the illusions of our programming that has been laid as the foundation of our characters from childbirth forward is of the utmost importance to our change. We have to have the audacity to admit to ourselves that we have been wrong about certain ideas and concepts when the evidence shows us that. One of the biggest things about the ego is that it never wants to admit that it is wrong. To break through these barriers of illusions, we must acknowledge where we have been wrong and admit to ourselves and stop lying to ourselves in order for us to progress into a higher state of consciousness. Contrary to what most people erroneously believe, the ego is not solely a negative aspect of our consciousness. There is a direct evolutionary importance to the ego. The ego allows us to distinguish one thing from another, and without this capability, one would not be able to distinguish their own experience from the experience of other beings. If one was standing under a tree branch broke, and then a tree branch broke and came flying towards their face. It is the ego that allows the individual to be able to distinguish that they need to move in order to protect themselves from being smashed by the tree branch. It allows them to tell the difference between the tree branch and themselves. Because if they didn't have the ego, then they would think they literally are the tree branch. And yes, we are all connected, even us and that tree. But we also need a portion of our consciousness so that we can individuate ourselves to be able to have a unique experience here for the betterment of the all. Every man's true teacher is his own higher self, and when the life is brought under the control of reason, this higher self is released from bondage to appetites and impulses, and becomes priest, sage, and illuminator. Manly P. Hall. Emancipation from bondage. And I'd like to say here that I'm sorry for moving through these so quickly, but I have a narrow time frame to be able to get through all this. Honestly, this presentation should be about 4 hours long, and it was a rush job. So, bear with me with what I put together here. We are currently being held under duress by the governments of our world and their enforcers, aka order followers. Duress is the condition of coercion of an individual or groups of individuals by other individuals or groups, and through threats of violence, we are prevented from exercising our free will to engage in rights which we actually possess if those who are being coerced do not comply with the demands or the commands they are given. They are accosted with violence until they do comply, up to death. This is by de facto a system of slavery. That's what statism truly is. And on the right here we have the great meme, statism, the brilliant idea that we give a small group of people the right to kidnap, steal from, and kill us so that we can be protected from people who kidnap, steal from, and kill us. When in fact, that is not a right. You can't give that right. That's trying to delegate wrongs to people, and you can't do that. Those forms of behaviors are all forms of violence, which means that you cannot grant that to any other being. You can't say, oh, you can go steal from these people. That's an illusion. That's ego. That is moral relativity is what it is. Slavery is the claim of ownership over your body, your product of labor, or your possessions in whole or in part. All innate rights are property rights. Without understanding this, one cannot comprehend what slavery truly is and is not, meaning we can't truly understand what freedom is. We all must have the ability to exercise our natural rights. We never have the right to infringe upon another person's rights. Thus, any action that does so is not a right and is an action that leads to theft and harm. It's not just leads to theft, it is theft. and it is harmful. It's a form of violence, which means to violate somebody else or some other sentient being. Anybody who violently prevents a person or persons from exercising these rights is making a claim over what they can rightfully do with their body, thus is a claim that they own those people's bodies, which is the very definition of slavery. To claim that you own the product of labor over somebody's body is an extension to claim to own somebody's body, which is why taxation is a form of slavery. It is not consentful, it is not voluntary. It is literally theft, and it's a claim of ownership over a percentage of your product of labor, which in extension is a claim of ownership over your body and what you do with your body. Those who do this or condone this can never be holistically a good person, and this should never be seen as an acceptable behavior or behaviors. None of these should ever be seen as behaviors that are acceptable in society. Absolutely not. Ever. Never, ever. And here is an amazing quote by Max Heindel. It should not be too difficult for any person of average intelligence to acquire a knowledge of at least the outlines of the scheme of evolution. That such a knowledge is of the utmost importance will, we think, be conceded by every intelligent individual. We live in this world, governed by the laws of nature. Under these laws we must live and work, and we are powerless to change them. If we know them and intelligently cooperate with them, these nature forces become most valuable servants. If, on the other hand, we do not understand them, and in our ignorance work contrary to them, they become most dangerous enemies, capable of terrible destruction. Therefore, the more we know of the working methods of nature, which later is but the visible symbol of the invisible God, the better able we shall be to take advantage of the opportunities it offers for growth and power, for emancipation from bondage, and for elevation to self-mastery. This is one of my favorite quotes. And obviously he's speaking about natural law and the ascension process and us living in harmony with natural law principles. The sacred gift of anger. This section of the presentation is directly inspired by Mark Passio's The Sacred Gift of Anger presentation. I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That's the type of resolve we have to have when facing the current iniquities and inequities that humankind is suffering from. The concept of anger has been demonized in human society as only a negative emotion. The expression of rightful anger or righteous anger is discouraged and is perceived to be solely wrong or bad. This idea that anger is solely a negative emotion comes from the lack of understanding about the valid purposes for all the emotions that we experience, especially anger. It is very clear that in our modern culture, this is deliberately propagated through society as part of the agenda to create docile and obedient slaves. Anger itself is neither good nor evil until wielded. What determines its result is the level of consciousness that is wielding that emotion. It is very common that those who express anger are highly shunned and shamed for doing so, without ever asking the most critical question regarding why the person is expressing such an emotion. Why is this person angry? So that's one of the major issues. Like, are you angry for a legitimate reason, for a true good cause? Or are you just angry over some triviality? You know, oh, you spilt coffee on the table today, so I'm extremely upset. Or you didn't text me back in time, I'm, extremely upset about that. Or are you angry about the condition of slavery? There is a justifiable reason to express righteous anger, and we need to understand that. But anger is a double-edged sword, so we have to be very cautious with it. It's a very powerful sword, very, very powerful sword. Anger is an emergent property of our consciousness that is much more than a simple emotion. Anger is a sacred gift from creation and has an evolutionary purpose and reason for existing. Anger can be a transformative force when it is used for the right reasons and the right circumstances. It is a powerful tool to not only create much needed change, but also to stand against the injustice in the world. Authentic righteous anger is an expression of true love from the essence of objective morality and goodness. When the condition of immorality arises in our presence, it becomes a moral obligation to activate the heart based consciousness to create positive change in a world that has been led astray from morality. Righteous anger is the most sharp sword to be wielded against the evil in our world. When our anger is tempered with true courage, it becomes an unstoppable force in the battle for true freedom. And I really love this picture that I found of the Hulk, protecting the pure, sacred feminine goddess from the mob, from the immoral mob that's coming to destroy the sacred goddess. And some people may look at it a different way, but I look at it as, the true heart-based consciousness coming online, and him being green correlates to the heart chakra. And this kind of relates back to the sacred mysteries being ripped out of the temples by the mob, because you could look at the sacred feminine principle as those mysteries which need to be protected and nurtured. And yeah, I mean, that's what we're seeing today, is that these things are being burned out by these ignorant dunces that want to, just absolutely destroy all the pure essences of the mystery schools and traditions. Right of free will choice. So a few people may get upset about this one. Contrary to the erroneous modernly held beliefs, we do not have the right to choose whatever actions we want. The notion that we have the right to free will choice is oxymoronic, since a right is an action that does not violate other beings. Then it follows logically that we do not have the right to choose to commit wrongdoings, or in other words, to manifest violence upon other sentient beings. We have the ability or capability to choose whatever we want, but not the right to choose whatever we want. This idea is a moral relativistic notion which obfuscates the definitive definition of what a right actually is. So yeah, you have the ability to choose whatever you want, but you don't have the right to choose to do wrongdoings. That is completely contradictory and an antithetical concept when it comes to this. So you don't have the right to free will choice. You have the ability to free will choice, or the ability of free will choice. And we just really need to understand this. I hear this all the time. And what it is an excuse for people to get away with choosing to do wrongdoings. That's really what this comes down to, is that people want to do whatever they want to do without suffering the consequences. And that's the problem with people, is that they don't care about the consequences of doing harm unto other people, including themselves. Silence as violence. Contrary to the erroneous, modernly held beliefs, we do not have the right to remain silent about whatever we want. We only possess the right to remain silent about things that do not diminish the rights and freedoms of others. In truth, it is not a right to not speak about the current iniquities and inequities, such as slavery, because this silence is a form of consent and is a form of violence onto other people. If you sit back and say nothing in the face of violence and evil, you are part of the problem, and you are part of the violence and the evil. Silence hides violence. Nothing strengthens authority so much as silence. Da Vinci. When freedom is at stake, your silence is not golden, it is yellow. Tom Anderson. Passivity is a psychopathology that prevents an individual from creating real and positive change in themselves and the world. If we are passively accepting evil and remaining silent when we have the capability to speak up about the iniquities and inequities in our world, this becomes a form of consent to the current condition. Thus, we ourselves are condoning the evil in the world through our silence. Those through their silence allow evil to go unchallenged are equally, if not more, immoral than those who are actually doing it. It's like sitting back and watching somebody rape a child and you doing nothing when you have the capability to stop that or prevent that. You are a coward is what you are. And you are not a moral being for doing that. And you're consenting to that behavior if it is going on in your presence and you're not stopping it. We must seek the truth and speak the truth. It is our moral obligation to seek the truth and speak the truth as wide and far as possible by using the tools that we have available to our consciousness. These tools include many forms of media publication platforms in which one must learn the ins and outs of how to use these tools to ensure quality content is produced. Even though this is a daunting task to some, it is an absolute requirement in the increasing technological advancements of our society. We must be the beacons of truth, a bonfire shining so bright that all those in the pits of suffering and agony can see the light and have a guiding force to help them pull themselves up out of the darkness. Words are not enough, though. We cannot just rely upon words. I don't trust words, I trust actions. People can tell you anything, but actions tell you everything, especially about their moral character. So we need actions. So yes, at a certain level, words are a form of behaviors to a certain degree, but it's a very, very low degree. We actually have to take the willpower, we have to enact the willpower to actually act and do something about this. And that's what this conference is about. These are actual actions. So even though there's a lot of words being spoken here, this is also a big form of action. But it goes back to, we just have to know when to act and when not to act. We have to have the wisdom to distinguish what actions we need to take in these current situations and which ones that we should not, depending on the risk versus reward scenario and the ultimately, where we're at in this condition. The lost aphorism. What is an aphorism? An aphorism is a conscious statement of a principle. Well, what is a principle? A principle is that which comes first, which ultimately is the objective truth and morality. All other things must be built upon the first principle. With our principles, we must care enough to consciously state them in a well-formatted and composed way so that other beings of creation can come to understand them without needing to filter through the ambiguity and dogma. It is crucial as a great worker to ensure that their aphorisms are composed to a degree that matches the level of consciousness of the listener. Revelations through the occult. The epiphanic nature of the revelations from the study of the occult mysteries is of the utmost importance for real change to occur in ourselves and the world. The gnosis of our spiritual nature and the edification of natural law principles of the universe is absolutely required for human evolution and ascension to take place. This is the painstaking path of truth, for it is the only way to long-term freedom and growth. So what is natural law? Well, this is a very basic definition of natural law, and in no way am I going to explain all the ins and outs of natural law here today. I'm just going to give you a very, simplistic understanding of it, just to whet your appetite and push you through the door. Natural law is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal, and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of behaviors of beings with the capacity for holistic intelligence, or in other words, the ability to understand the difference between a violent action that destroys freedom and a non-violent action that expands and expresses freedom. The understanding of natural law is centered upon bringing our conscience into alignment with objective morality. This means definitively knowing which behaviors are rights because they do not violate other sentient beings and which behaviors are wrongs because they do violate other sentient beings. When human beings in the aggregate live in harmony with natural law and therefore are objectively moral, they become and will remain free, as long as they continue to remain objectively moral at the aggregate level. When human beings in the aggregate live in opposition to natural law and therefore are objectively immoral, they become and remain enslaved. This is the law of freedom. No being with the capacity for holistic intelligence can escape this universal law. And this is another way to put it. As the aggregate morality increases, aggregate freedom increases. As aggregate morality declines, aggregate freedom declines. And I use the card of justice here to give an example of true natural law, of true balance of justice in the universe. The banes of change. The most devastating enemies of change are ignorance, self-loathing, and apathy. Contrary to the erroneous, modernly held dogmatic beliefs, we do not have the right to be apathetic or to not care about whatever we want. We only possess the right to be apathetic about things that do not encroach upon or diminish the rights and freedoms of others. In truth, it is not a right to not care about the current condition of slavery. So do whatever it takes to find your true care, because most people just don't care at all in this world anymore. Contrary to the erroneously modernly held dogmatic beliefs, we do not have the right to be ignorant about whatever we want. We only possess the right to be ignorant about things that do not encroach upon or diminish the rights and freedoms of others. In truth, it is not a right to ignore the current condition of slavery. Yet again, not your right, because if your ignorance is leading to and consenting and perpetuating that system of slavery, then you are diminishing and encroaching upon other people's rights to live free. And you do not have that right. Contrary to the erroneous, modernly held dogmatic beliefs, we do not have the right to be self-loathing. We only possess the right to be self-loathing when it does not encroach upon or diminish the rights and freedoms of others. In truth, self-loathing leads us into accepting the current condition of slavery, because if we or you do not care about your own enslavement, why would you care about other people's enslavements? If you hate yourself, then why would you care about other people? If you're in a self-loathing condition, then being enslaved isn't going to matter to you. If you're apathetic, if you're ignorant, or if you're self-loathing. And these are all directly related. These are the, internal trinity of evil within ourselves that perpetuate this system of slavery and actually leads to immense suffering all across the board. So like I said, do whatever it takes to find your true care. All three of which are an abdication of personal responsibility to the process of generating true, healthy change in one's own life and the world. These are all forms of incompetence used to build monuments of stagnation through the lack of purpose and drive. These psychopathologies need to be healed at the root causal factor in order for us to manifest what we say we want in our world. And the way that we heal these things is by, finding true self-respect, by remembering who we truly are, by getting in contact with our higher self, by getting out of the abuse victim cycle. So we have to stop making excuses and start making change. Stop saying I can't, I won't, I might, later, or tomorrow. Start saying I can and I will. I will make a change. I will do this. I will do what is right, no matter what is going on, no matter how big the tsunami of ignorance is around me, or how much peer pressure I have that's, telling me to not do that. I will be that change. And then I used here, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. This is an occult tradition, and I'm sure most of us are familiar with this. But the main part of this is love is the law, love under will. Change is required. This society does not want you to become wise. If people are wise, they cannot be controlled, subjugated, and exploited. The truly intelligent cannot be forced to live like robots. In fact, they will have the fragrance of rebellion all around them. The condition of humanity is built upon the fundamental power differential between those who hold this knowledge and those who do not. A truly conscious act of change against the current condition is the only way to truly grow. We must reject all illusory worldviews that have been grafted onto our subconscious mind from birth by the social engineers. The study of the components of consciousness is of all importance to the initiate and to those who want to create real and positive change. Each step towards higher consciousness is a journey made by following the heart-based consciousness and heart-based intelligence instead of following the crowd, and by choosing knowledge over the veils of ignorance. A wise man is a fire, alive, a flame. He would rather die than to be enslaved, but he knows that if he dies, he cannot share the warmth of his flame with others, so we must be conscious about our decisions in these draconian times. Another key component to this journey is positive thinking. Positive thinking is crucial for self-change, for it holds the key to reprogramming our subconscious mind. Using a daily routine of repetition and positive affirmation can help to retrain one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions, which leads to tremendous improvements in one's own life. Most people are dwelling in the negative aspects of our mind, and these thoughts and emotions become habitually hardwired into our subconscious mind. Knowing this, we can reverse its negative effects and rewire ourselves by repetitively thinking in the most optimal fashion, which includes facing the negative in order to transmute it into a positive, but not dwelling upon it. Until you change your thinking, you will always recycle your experiences. Responsibility and due diligence. Freedom takes 100% responsibility for one's own personal consciousness and the manifested results of their consciousness. It also means being personally responsible for doing your own due diligence and becoming aware of the requirements for the conditions that we say we want to manifest in society. We have a responsibility to learning and reconstructing the occult sciences that have been irrefutably destroyed and fragmented down the ages. It is only in our current times that we have the capability of doing this process. This is not a game, and it means the difference between the survival of principles that enshrine freedom versus the perpetuation of the moral relativistic ideas that enshrine slavery. To be lazy in our current condition is a sheer act of willful ignorance that does nothing but perpetuate and fuels the monstrous system of slavery in our world. Learning is not attained by chance. It must be sought for with ardor and diligence. That's a quote by Abigail Adams. Courage and persistence. Just like any muscle, courage must be exercised to ensure that we have the willpower to act in the face of fear. The individual's liberties are worth defending at all hazards. It is our moral obligation to defend them against all forms of violence. In order to do this, we must have the courage to respect ourselves, to speak the truth, and to defend what is right in spite of fear. It is only through the courage to challenge the default conditions of society and culture that have ever brought about great change. The over-romanticized tranquility of servitude and conformity must be resisted, for if it is not, we will find we will be at the whims of those who do not have the best interests at heart or do have the will to act. I think I misspoke on that one. Let me rephrase that. For if it is not, we will find that we will be at the whims of those who do not have our best interests at heart, but do have the will to act. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. So this is something I find that is very important in our current day. Being in the real. We have here a graph of extreme pessimism on the far left, realism in the middle, and extreme optimism on the far right. And for those who understand the left brain, right brain polarization and imbalance, they can understand why I've associated it this way. So extreme pessimism is associated with a left brain imbalance. This is a tendency to see and imagine the worst aspects of things or believe that the worst will happen, a lack of hope or confidence in the future and in yourself to create change. Extreme optimism is associated with the right brain imbalance. An unrealistic hopefulness and overconfidence about the future or the successful outcome of something when in fact there is no way things will change. And what we need is to be in realism, to be a realist, which is associated with the balance of the two hemispheres. The pragmatic approach to the current situation or things that an individual must both be willing to face the consequences of those things and the potentials of those things to change if the requirements are met. Changing the things that you can change and accepting the things that you cannot change. Many people assume that pointing out the current condition of humanity and its state of consciousness is pessimistic, such as the truth that all of humanity is currently being held under duress and is currently enslaved by a hidden ruling class. A person who is not willing to face the realism of the situation is in a state of denial and under a form of emotional mind control. Nothing will change this truth, no matter how it is euphemized or romanticized. Realism incorporates both pessimism and optimism and balances it with objective truth and reality. It is important to not confuse a realistic approach to the condition of humanity with either an extreme optimistic or a pessimistic one. Those who are in the real will be the most beneficial to create the most powerful change in the world. Being in the real is the most optimal way of functioning and is the only state of consciousness that will lead us to true solutions. Who is behind the curtain? This is something that we all get asked so much. Who are they? Who are these people in control? And I'm here to tell you, you can find out a lot of the people in control, but does it really matter? When everyone first comes online or starts to awaken to the current condition of humanity, they always run directly to who is in control, looking to place blame on a small select few individuals for the overwhelming immoral condition of society. It is true that a small cabal or group of dark occultists have dictated and directed the masses into the current condition to a certain degree. But ultimately, we must stop abdicating our own personal responsibility and thinking that we are not at some level morally culpable for complying and consenting to this condition. If you were to know these individuals and we decided to remove them, there is more than 500,000 plus people that would willfully take up that position to control humanity, and that is a low estimate. In truth, those who are the most sophisticated dark occultists do not have traceable family names, and they are far more strategic when it comes to protecting who they actually are, knowing the high risk and potential that humanity would awaken to this condition to a certain degree and start to hunt them down. These people do not keep family bloodline names, they do not shop at your local supermarket, and they are not the politicians on the world stage, nor are they even the world bankers. They are the ones that control these groups of people from the shadows. You will never know who these people are, and good luck trying. Because, if I was that type of dark occultist, I would make sure to cover my ass with that. I would make sure that nobody would ever be able to trace who I am. And I would have a firewall of different types of groups and different types of people to protect me from being outed. And this is how the mafia works. You have these types of firewalls. And I'm not saying it's impossible to really know who these people are. I'm sure we could find out eventually to flush them out, and we'd have to trace it back through these types of groups that are being controlled but by the real dark occultists. But it doesn't really matter, because what matters is that the masses of humanity still believe in these erroneous dogmatic ideologies, and that's truly what's perpetuating this type of system. It's not just because the dark occultists and what they've been doing. Yeah, they have a big part to play in that, but if we all get our minds awakened and really start to fight back and recondition our subconscious minds, then they won't have any control over us. It is only because we've been duped into believing these things and into believing things like moral relativity that this system is continuing to perpetuate itself. The proper role of the ego. So this is something I mentioned earlier. Even though the ego is mainly talked about in modern culture as solely a negative attribute of the human psyche, contrary to the assumption, the ego actually has a proper positive role in our life. The idea of ego death is simply a metaphor for ensuring that the ego is not in the throne of the self, or in other words, is not controlling every part of our everyday thoughts, emotions, and behaviors and lives. The proper role of the ego is the individualization process. It is the part of us that allows ourselves to distinguish different characteristics to the degree that we have our own unique experiences in this realm. A healthy ego mind is one of the most powerful tools an individual could utilize in their everyday life, which can ensure them that they have the willpower to push forward in the face of these troubled times. It is a self-defense for the human psyche and helps to prevent and keep us away from institutionalized belief systems and groupthinks when it is in balance, when it comes to it being in balance. So truly, when you have a true raised ego into the higher self, you become a true sovereign. And I'm sure I sound kind of repetitive with a lot of the things I'm saying here. Like I said, this was a rush presentation, but these things need to be brought to the table, because the new age communities, they want to teach you that the ego is completely all negative. And we need to know that the ego just means I. It's about the individual. And just like I said earlier, it's about you having a unique experience and that's why the ego, is born into our psyches so that we can actually have a unique experience. But we must not, falter on the understanding that we're connected to the all at our essence and at many different levels of our existence. So we have to have a balance between the I and the many, the one and the all. The heart of darkness. The path of true change lies in facing the pain of reality. Most people are wandering in darkness, seeking the light outside of the darkness, failing to realize that the light is in the heart of darkness. Without brazenly facing our own inner darkness, it will always come back to haunt us in the end, or it will be used by those who know the deeper aspects of psychology to gain power over us and manipulate us into actions that we normally would not manifest by our own correct judgment. So The Heart of Darkness is a book by Joseph Conrad, and there's an amazing movie that adapts this book called Apocalypse Now, which is about the spiritual journey of the self. And I highly recommend looking into that book. But this leads me into the integration of the shadow. And a lot of us here should understand, what the shadow work is. And if not, you need to fully study it and start to really comprehend how important it is. The shadow self is described as the undealt with, dark or negative parts of our subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is connected to our true essence and knows and perceives all. If the shadow self is not worked with and integrated into our personality, it will be expressed in very imbalanced and negative ways. This is especially true when it comes to our repression of our healthy emotional dynamics. Under such conditions, the imbalance amplifies at the subconscious level, and then it manifests in negative ways, such as disassociation, unbalanced anger, unjustified reactivity, depression, apathy, self-loathing, ignorance, and many, many others. And any of these negative emotions that they will thwart our forward progress towards our higher self and ascension. The shadow self will always be present within ourselves. It is up to us to acknowledge it and work with it. If we choose not to work with it, we will suffer the dire consequences and inflict suffering upon others. Various forms of social engineering and mind control techniques and tactics intended to convince us and program us to suppress our shadow self, which in turn creates a buildup in the subconscious mind of negative emotions that turn into depression and eventually into shame. Shame is one of the most destructive and lowest levels of consciousness a human being can exist in. So, in Jungian psychology, the shadow or the shadow aspect is a part of the unconscious mind consisting of repressed weaknesses, shortcomings, and instincts. Everyone carries a shadow, Jung wrote, and The less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and deeper it is. It may be, in part, one's link to more primitive animal instincts, which are superseded during early childhood and by the conscious mind. Elevation to self-mastery. You will never have a greater or lesser dominion than that over yourself. The height of a man's success in ascension is gauged by his self-mastery. He who does not control his own mind will be controlled by those who seek to control. To be a master on a specific skill, practice one thing 10,000 times rather than practicing 10,000 things one time. You can't master who and how you are in the world without becoming mindful of your innate infinite value and the way the human mind operates. Without mindfulness, we are susceptible to becoming passive spectators of life and potentially victims of circumstance, but most importantly, we become mental slaves to the external sorcery and internal incompetence and self-abandonment. A true master is not one with the most students, but one who creates the most masters. The secret of freedom lies in the education of the people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant. Maximilien Robespierre. Everything. When it comes to applying this knowledge, we must be well composed and understand that timing is of crucial importance. Just like any form of the great works, such as a musical symphony, timing plays a huge factor in how the results will play out and how they are perceived by the audience of the world. Most people want everything to be done instantaneously, but the true great work is that of educating the masses, which will not happen in a single lifetime. When we fall into the modality of ego fixation, onto wanting the results to be done now, we end up doing more harm to the great work and to ourselves. We have reached a point where we do have to act immediately to educate and ensure that we do not get pummeled by the oncoming onslaught of tyranny and the New World disorder. We must fully recognize that the work that we have been generating is still in its adolescence phase, and we must have the patience to see where the actions we have put into manifestation will take us. Go back to cause and effect. It takes time for the effect to come back around. A well-composed tactical strategy is needed to counteract the social engineering of our time. Just like martial arts, we must learn to use the enemy's movement and energy against them. And this can only be done by understanding the mindset of the enemy. This is why it is of crucial importance to study the dark occult and their techniques of manipulation. And there's no other time than to do that now. So get in the work. Start studying these things, especially within yourself. Study your own darkness and you will understand the darkness of others. Because honestly, all the evil deeds that are being done we are all capable of doing at some level. We might be less inclined to do those things, but we are capable of doing those things. Doesn't mean we will do those things, but we all have it within us to do those things at some level. Because the same darkness that's within me is the same darkness that's within the dark occultists of the world. It's the same darkness that's within you. It's all part of the same archetypal part of our psyche. Nothing great is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer you that there must be a time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. Epictetus. So we need to be united in our task. One of the biggest failures I see in the freedom and truth communities is that we are not strongly bounded together and united in our task for ending slavery. One of the main reasons for this is that the mass majority of people still do not understand the requirements for manifesting freedom. They still lack the in-depth knowledge of natural law and the application of that knowledge to generate a different result. It is important that we understand that the union of our consciousness and the efforts must be brought together in order to create a different outcome. We must have the resolve to never give up and never surrender, but also organize ourselves and work with others who are like-minded individuals to ensure that we are amplifying our efforts into manifestation. We have to come together. That's what the SEED conference is about. It's coming together, bringing like-minded individuals together so that we can amplify this work out into creation, to amplify it and put it into the field of creation. The true one great work. The magnum opus of humanity is that of true freedom. The great work is not the easy way out. It is the arduous task of dissolving your ego illusions to help raise yourself and others up into a higher level of consciousness. The process means that we each must abandon our dogmatic beliefs, which are binding and impeding our progress as a species. The widespread ignorance of natural law and truth has led to the ultimate forms of suffering here on earth. It is the highest responsibility of each and every individual to stand firmly against the current state of slavery and live in harmony with natural law, love, and truth. To be awake means you cannot, by definition, support or condone any forms of violence, which include all violence from authority and government. The truly awakened one resists and confronts the evil that most people refuse to acknowledge. It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen to set brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. Samuel Adams, one of my favorite founding fathers. And here are 3 quotes for the ending of this presentation. Most people do not really want freedom because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility. Sigmund Freud. Better to die fighting for freedom than to be a prisoner all the days of your life. Bob Marley. He who has overcome his fears will truly be free. Aristotle. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope that you have found value in this presentation today. And as a final statement, all beings have infinite value. Love is freedom. Fear is an illusion. All rights are innate. Truth can never be destroyed. Let us come together in this task to help end the suffering of humanity. Thank you.